Today we're looking at enterprise cloud data storage, and I'm Doug Atkinson from Solutions Review, and we have a special guest with us. It's Vekiarides from ClearSky Data, CTO, co-founder. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, ClearSky Data is got a fairly ambitious story. You guys were in stealth for a couple of years, and then you came out recently with a fairly ambitious story around cloud data storage, backup and disaster, really the full panoply of storage needs for the enterprise. How did it come about, and really what's the business case that you're presenting?
Well, it's just like any startup. There's always a story, when we finally built the system and got our first set of customers, we actually went through this period of navel gazing, trying to figure out why they bought. And almost invariably, the reasons that they were buying our service was because they had some sort of data protection need or some disaster recovery need, and because of certain attributes of the service. For example, we're in the cloud with all your data. We have the ability to access your data in multiple locations without standing up another silo of storage. You know, there are economic reasons that these guys were buying our service, and it was sort of hidden in the overall sales process, and so we had to tease it out. When we started to actually embrace that message, we started to realize that there's an actual market out there for businesses that want to protect their data, and in some cases their data protection infrastructure is either clunky, old, or too unwieldy to do the types of things they needed to do. And so that's sort of been the market beachhead that we've been going after for the last year or so, and I think we've gotten a pretty good track record actually trying to get some small and large customers to sign up.
Well, and it's a massive market, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
I mean, you're talking about two elements at work, really. It's the overwhelming amount of data that's coming into the enterprise right now that needs to be dealt with and backed up, right, and potentially recovered in case of a disaster, but also just the amount of organizations that are now moving to really take advantage of all the efficiencies of the cloud.
That's right. We have an interesting business model because we're a service. You pay as you go. So you don't really have to sign up for all the capacity you're going to need for the next 3 years, which is what a typical enterprise gear vendor will try and sell you. And so we're almost always going to come in cheaper because the upfront commit is smaller, and so you don't have to try and go through the exercise of predicting what your needs are. You can scale as your needs grow, and so that there's economics there that are very attractive to the enterprise. And as you know, when people talk about cloud, it's all about OpEx and pay as you go. It's the business model that the enterprise finds attractive rather than spending on CapEx. So we're very unique in that sense, but I think that's a neat innovation. We also have to have the table stakes of all the other functionality that they're expecting from their typical enterprise infrastructure. So we have a foot in both worlds, both the cloud economics world and sort of the enterprise data management world, where you have the performance and all the other management features that have been developed across many vendors for the last 20 years. They're sort of like, just required. Some of these aren't available in the cloud. So we're kind of a mixture of both worlds.
Well, and you do have an industrial strength solution, but really what you're asking folks to do is almost a cultural transformation in terms of how they've been thinking about their own storage.
That's right. We are trying to get them around to the idea that they're going to be able to use compute in different places. So the real asset that companies have is their data, the actual data, and data management it's a thing in the enterprise. And it's going to be a thing in the cloud when there's enough data in there that people actually realize that they need to manage it more carefully. And so the data has entropy. Data, you can't just carry it around everywhere you want to set up compute. And what our infrastructure does is, besides the economics of it, it actually allows you optionality. So if you want to surface some data sets in a cloud provider, we give you the ability to do that. Without actually making a full copy in that cloud, you can access it through our network, and it looks like, and it feels as if it was local inside that cloud. And so we've actually gotten some partnerships together with the big cloud providers, but also some of the service provider clouds that are specializing in VMware, and that's a new mindset, and I think it's starting to really pick up steam, where customers don't really want to own compute infrastructure. They can just rent it when they need it.
Well, and you have some of the largest technology companies in the world who have already passed the idea of whether they're going to make a bet on this. I mean, these large cloud providers are all in with regard to this is where it's going, this is where enterprises need to be, and it's really just a matter of we'll be there when they finally get there as well. And I think that's what you believe. That's also.
Yeah, we absolutely, and the enterprises have the same concerns that they've always had. So when you look at these big cloud monoliths, they look just like IBM in the 70s. They're going to take everything, they're going to lock you in. You'll never be able to get your stuff out. And so our story, which is really one of having that optionality. You can store your data somewhere, but you can use resources anywhere, and so you don't have to be locked in. That is starting to become relevant. Multi-cloud, when we started the company in 2013, was sort of this imaginary figment that in some cases when you would say it, people would laugh at you. Actually, I dare say people will still laugh at me, but we have real conversations with real enterprises that have needs to go across multiple clouds, and so the conversations are actually fairly frequent now. And so it's a real market, and you need a real technology stack that can enable that.
Well, and I think every enterprise recognizes kind of in their core that the old way won't scale. Not with the amounts of data that are coming in. I mean, they can try to make it scale, but it's, in the end, a losing game. I mean, you do have to come up with a different approach.
That's right. And, the cloud providers, for their part, they've shown that they can create immense scale. There are other places where they fall short, but when it comes to just basic scale and reasonable availability, they've done a great job. And being able to leverage that as a component in your overall enterprise architecture is it's a goal of ours, but I think it should be a goal of every enterprise IT architect. It's not just to use your own infrastructure or build your own infrastructure, but think about how you can leverage other infrastructures that may have resiliency characteristics that are superior to what you could do on-prem because of their scale, because of all sorts of things. And so, our system is built around the idea that there are things that we prefer not to try to make resilient ourselves. And so, you get economic benefit from that, and you get some level of simplicity. Things like disaster recovery become much simpler when you have something like us.
Well, so and so the challenge for a young company that's asking enterprises to take a bit of a cultural leap is to overcome some obvious objections, which I know you need to address. What are those, and kind of how do you kind of walk them through that?
In general, and surprisingly so, we tend to be the first time any reasonable volume of data for an enterprise has gone outside of the four walls of their data center. And so that creates a lot of friction. And we need to talk about security. We need to talk about compliance. We need to talk about all of the different types of scenarios that might occur. When GDPR is now suddenly constantly coming up. So this creates friction because, if you're an iron vendor, you probably already have an arrangement. You can just basically, as an IT manager, you could just buy something from any one of these vendors and it'll just show up, and you don't have to get a lot of approvals. With us, we have to go through a whole security review and a legal review. I think that is going to change eventually, but that's a big objection these days, so there's a fair amount of inertia. Doing it this way, somebody really needs to want to do it today, and so it's not. As a startup, you kind of look for that. You kind of want people to do something a little courageous and adventurous. And
well, so my sense is that your approach is probably a land and expand type approach,
right,
where you're looking for those spots where you can add value straight away, but not ask for the whole enchilada necessarily. Maybe it's backup or disaster recovery as opposed to the full data management.
That's right. Especially in the bigger enterprises, we'll pick up a workload that's really large, that's impossible to back up. And we'll be able to do that because we have our architecture where you have a copy here and a copy out in the cloud, they're always in sync, and you can always recover if something bad happens on site. And so we check off a requirement, and that is it's actually very hard to do with on-prem equipment because it's it's expensive. If you have hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes that you need to buy 2 copies of in 2 locations and stand up all this stuff, and so it's it's an easy sort of wedge to go to drive, but once we're in. To your point, land and expand. We have a large backed up workload, but maybe there's another primary storage array that's going off contract, and maybe you need a disaster recovery anyway. How about we take the money you're going to spend there and actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone? I mean, so we've actually created a pretty reasonable track record of getting customers to buy a second time or a third time within a couple of quarters of making the first purchase. So it's very gratifying to see, but it's definitely, even the small customers will do that.
So are you finding any particular verticals that you're having some success with, or maybe size of enterprise that you're able to penetrate early?
So we're out of Boston, and so healthcare and biotech around here has been, it's everywhere, and so you can't help but find a few customers there. But they do have these very large data sets. Early on, our first big customer was Partners Healthcare here in the Northeast.
It's a good logo.
Yes, not bad. I think the healthcare vertical, because for lots of different reasons, we actually completed a full security review, and we also began our audit process. We ended up getting SOC 2 attestation at the end of last year. So we've done a lot of things as a result of that one customer's requirements that make us very, very, sort of aligned with other similar customers.
Well, yeah, I mean, crossing that Rubicon is no joke.
And it was, for a small company, it was a pretty substantial procedural, endeavor, and it's no fun, but we did it. If you come visit our office,
the first ones are the toughest.
This is the first startup I ever worked for. It happens to be my first startup I ever worked for, where you can't get into the front door. You actually need to ring the doorbell, and we have to let you in, and we have to make sure that you're signed in. This is all part of SOC 2. So it's really
right.
You have no idea, but
we won't come visit.
You're welcome to, but you'll have to leave some documentation. It made us aligned to that particular vertical, and so we continue to chase customers in that space. Technology space is another area where we've done well, where they're fairly large workloads. That either in data analytics or test dev, where they're not protected, where one bad day could actually just take out a whole bunch of people and make them completely unproductive. Being able to provide flash level performance plus giving you the option to be able to bring back yesterday's work if you lose everything today, that turned out to be a really interesting sort of value proposition for them. So we have a couple large customers in that space. And then we also have, we do seem to do well with nonprofits, I think the characteristics of some of those nonprofits and some of the smaller financials, that's another area where we do well. The characteristics of them is that they're relatively understaffed, they have real data needs, and they don't quite have a real DR or data protection sort of regimen, and so it's something that's bothering them, and they're afraid. Having a system that kind of makes all that problem go away, that fits in the budget of something else, that's actually another area. So financials and some of these nonprofits are very big on that. And if you go to our website, you'll see I think Special Olympics is up there. There's a few others that are customers of ours that are fall in that category. Small IT shops with big problems.
Well, that's exactly what we like to help out with here at Solutions Review, is to check out solutions, learn more about solutions that are innovative, that are trying to help solve real problems, but also are moving into that kind of have-to-have area of need. Where it's like, this is no longer a nice-to-have, this is a have-to-have, and I think. Certainly scalable cloud storage is one of them, and along with great backup and disaster recovery.
Sure.
So this has been great. Laz, thanks very much for being here.